It started on a rainy Thursday evening in a quiet suburb outside Denver. Maya and I had been married for 5 years. We didn't have children by choice, but we did have Rebbert, our golden retriever, our everything. He was loyal, intuitive, the kind of dog that sensed your emotions better than you did. Rebbert had a routine. He'd trot into the backyard at 6 p.m. sharp, chase the same squirrel along the fence, bark 3 times, then come back inside for dinner. But that night, something changed. The wind howled louder than usual. Rain lashed against the window panes like impatient fingers. And when Rebbert went outside, he didn't come back. At first, I thought he was chasing a rabbit or wandered into the neighbor's yard. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, calling his name, but the storm swallowed my voice. We searched for hours. No sign of him. Maya cried herself to sleep. The next morning, we printed flyers and drove through every corner of town, animal shelters, clinics, even gas stations. It felt like someone had torn a piece of our soul away. 3 days later, just as hope began to rot into grief, it happened. We were sitting in the living room, silent, when we heard the scratching at the front door. Maya jumped to her feet. I followed, heart pounding. She flung the door open and gasped. There he was, Rebbert, soaked, muddy, trembling, but it was him. Same honey brown eyes, same slightly torn right ear, same white-tipped tail. I knelt beside him, tears burning my eyes. Rebbert, boy, you came back. He licked my hand. Maya wrapped her arms around him. We were whole again, or so we thought. The first sign came that night. Rebbert didn't chase the squirrel. I opened the back door and stood waiting, but instead of darting across the yard like usual, he stood at the threshold, stiff as a statue, staring into the woods behind our house. Then he growled, a low, almost human growl, one I'd never heard from him before. Maybe he's still shaken from the storm, Maya offered. I agreed, trying to believe it myself. But the changes kept piling up. He no longer jumped on the bed in the morning. He stopped eating his favorite treats. He didn't bark when the mailman came. He just watched. His eyes lingered too long on things, corners of the room, reflections in mirrors, shadows that moved when nothing else did. And at night, I started hearing scratching, not from the door, from inside the walls. A week passed. I found Rebbert in the laundry room one evening, just sitting, staring at the washing machine. His reflection in the shiny metal looked off, like it blinked a second too late, like it was watching me instead of mimicking him. I shook the thought away. I was tired. Maybe I was just overthinking it, until the second Rebbert arrived. It was just after dinner. Maya was washing dishes, and I was on the couch, scrolling through lost pet forums, when I saw a message notification. Found dog matching your flyer. Still limping slightly. Located near Old Highway. Attached was a photo. My stomach turned. It was Rebbert, our Rebbert. The one in the picture had a small red collar. Ours had lost his during the storm. The one in the picture had the same torn ear, same white-tipped tail, same eyes. But unlike the thing in our home, he looked scared, desperate, real. I dropped my phone. Maya, I whispered, something's wrong. She turned confused. What is it? Before I could answer, a deep bark rang through the hallway. We both turned, and there, at the back door, stood another Rebbert, muddy, limping, panting. Behind me, the Rebbert in the living room stood up slowly and growled. The silence after the growl was heavier than the growl itself. I stood frozen in the hallway. Behind me was the dog we had taken in, the stray we called Rebbert. In front of me, pressed against the sliding glass door in the rain, was our Rebbert, the real one, his eyes wide with something that looked like sorrow and fear. Maya was speechless. Her fingers trembled in mine as we tried to make sense of what we were seeing. The dog behind us growled again, low and slow, like a warning. I unlocked the sliding door. The real Rebbert whined softly and stepped in. The moment his paws touched the wooden floor, everything changed. The growl turned into a snarl. The fake Rebbert lunged. There was a blur of teeth fur and snarls as the two identical dogs collided in the living room. They crashed into the coffee table, shattering it. Lamps fell. A painting dropped from the wall. Maya screamed. I pulled her toward the bedroom. But as I turned to grab my phone, I saw it. The dog we had adopted, the fake Rebbert, wasn't just angry. He was changing. His jaw split further than any normal dog's could, revealing rows of two sharp teeth. His fur rippled like it wasn't attached to skin, but to something else underneath. His eyes shifted color, green to yellow to pure black. It was no longer pretending. It had never been a dog. We slammed the door to the bedroom shut, locked it, and pushed the dresser in front. The two dogs were still fighting outside. And then, silence. No footsteps. No breathing. Just silence. We didn't sleep that night. When the morning light broke, we crept out. The living room was wrecked. Blood smeared across the tiles. Fur was scattered, but not as much as you'd expect from a fight. No bodies. No dogs. Not a single trace of either of them. The next day, things got worse. Lights flickered. Our refrigerator door opened on its own. I found scratches on the walls. Deep ones, like claws had tried to dig their way out or in. Maya started sleepwalking. At first, I thought she was just shaken by what happened. But then I found her whispering in her sleep, phrases that made no sense. Wrong one, we fed the wrong one. Don't trust the light, it lies. He's in the fur, he's wearing it still. She wouldn't remember any of it in the morning. On the third night, I caught her feeding something outside. It was too dark to see clearly, but she stood in the yard, hunched over, whispering and placing raw meat on the ground. When I turned on the porch light, she turned toward me. Her eyes glowed yellow for a second, then blinked, and she was herself again. I went back to the shelter. I needed answers, but the place was abandoned. Windows boarded up, phone disconnected. Only a single piece of paper taped to the door. If you found it's already in you. The house changed. I don't mean just emotionally. It physically changed. Rooms were smaller. Doors that once opened now didn't exist. A hallway extended far longer than it should. I stood at one end and couldn't see the other side. One night, I walked into our bedroom and the walls were covered in dog fur. Not glued, not hung, grown out of the walls. And on the mirror was a single paw print, bleeding. Rebbert came back, but I don't know if it was the real one anymore. He walked into the back door, limping, his fur ragged. But his eyes, they were familiar. Brown, gentle, desperate. Maya didn't look up when he entered. She just kept brushing her hair in front of the mirror. I bent down to check Rebbert's collar. Still worn, still ours, but it had been burned into his neck, fused with the skin. That night, I checked the baby monitor in the nursery. Our daughter was sleeping soundly, but in the far corner of the room, something sat. It looked like a dog, but the monitor flickered, and for a split second, it looked like a man crouched on all fours, smiling. I tried to take our daughter and leave. Maya blocked the door. She didn't speak, but her mouth moved, silently mimicking words that didn't belong to her, and her skin began to peel, not in wounds, but in shapes, like something underneath was stretching through. I slammed her against the wall and ran. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't, but I was terrified. I drove for miles. When I looked in the rear-view mirror, Rebbert sat in the back seat, but I hadn't brought him with me. The final straw came when I got home one morning after staying in a motel. The neighborhood was wrong. Every single house had a dog in the yard, identical dogs, all looking in the same direction, toward me, and on every door, written in red paint or blood, were the words, "He chose you." Inside our house, I found Maya and our daughter, still, silent, but breathing, and standing beside them were two Rebberts, one on each side, both watching me, both smiling. I tried to light the house on fire. It wouldn't burn. Matches wouldn't light. The lighter failed. Even when I smashed a gas line and flicked a spark, the flame died in seconds. That night, the TV turned on by itself. The screen showed footage from our wedding. then our honeymoon, then a new video, grainy, filmed from the corner of our living room. Maya and I asleep, Rebbert pacing in the hallway, then stopping, looking directly at the camera, and smiling with human teeth. I've accepted it now. This thing, this mimic, it doesn't just take form, it becomes family. It knows your memories, your habits, your dreams, and slowly, over time, it replaces you. I'm writing this down not to save myself. I know it's too late, but maybe someone will find this. Someone will read it and learn. Never adopt what comes to you on a rainy night, pretending to be what you've lost. Because sometimes what you let in never leaves. It just waits and watches. And when it's ready, it walks in wearing your skin.